thank you very much for the opportunity. I am going to be covering a number of things that were kind of touched on in the earlier sessions by Hugo and Joe. I will apologise in advance. I'm going to share an awful lot of thinking and material in this session, and the slides will be available. The latest set I've just shared with PMI, so they will be available. So what I'm actually going to cover, for those of you who've read it, I've been heavily involved in the last 12 to 18 months in sustainability, ESG carbon, as well as our ongoing work with human-centric data. I collapsed it all together recently when I was asked to look at this, delivering a session, I looked at the P5 standard that's been created by PMI and said, crikey, there's possibly an opportunity to make this a little bit more accessible and usable. And that's where the session idea came from. That's who I am. You can read that in your own time, who I am, and the QR code is for LinkedIn. I'm actually kind of chuffed because I wrote an article 17 years ago for the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors about sustainable project managers. And I can make that available if you're interested, but it was 17 years old and they had one bit in there I did push was why don't you as a project manager just cheekily stick in an aspect in the business case called sustainability, because nobody will like to check anyway. So that's a way of hardwiring it in. So these diagnostics, the things I'm going to talk to you about, we have applied this lots of times before, and Jonathan, who's you might have heard at the beginning, I'll work closely with. One of them was with the Project Data Analytics Task Force, and we did create something. I'll just show you this now. It was a carbon self-evaluation around 4 years ago, 3-4 years ago, and it did some automated reporting. Sadly, it's no longer live. We are looking at possibly bringing it back to life again. So that was my first instance of getting involved directly in doing the data side. What I've been doing in the last X months, because of other things I'm involved with, is immersing myself not only in the world of AI, but also in the world of sustainability and ESG. And this is just a smattering of the kind of reports and so on that have been captured. And for any of you who are using anything like Fathom or Obsidian, this is a snippet of my second brain or second memory that I use, proposed by Claude. Why am I showing that? Because everything that you're about to see, I have worked up this with Claude and taken bits and taken information from all sorts of different places. It knows everything we've ever written about human-centric data or we've done on sustainability and carbon, and that's a visual representation of it. So what we're going to be applying into this situation is something called human-centric data, and I'm going to cover it very quickly, what it is, and then talk about, so what is that, how does that get applied into the topic we're talking about, in particular PMI's P5 standard. And human-centric data is kind of all about capturing feelings, beliefs, perceptions of people, understanding how that impacts the decisions and behaviours they have, how that impacts the project outcomes, and then working back again on the impact, because it is actually a loop. So it is, we believe the decisions and behaviours are absolutely tied to feelings, beliefs, and perceptions. So why would you not measure meaningfully feelings, beliefs, and perceptions? Now, what does measure look like? These are the kinds of things that we capture: quality relationship. Joe mentioned in the intro about psychological safety. We do biases, diversity. So we look at how do you capture these type of things. Now, I'm talking about the way we're doing it, but I don't want this to make this sound as if it's only us that can do it. You could be measuring this kind of thing yourself. We just happen to have a platform and the expertise and experience of doing this. But these ideas, hopefully, you can adopt and use. And we tend to do it anonymously, continuously. They act as lead indicators. So gut feelings, perceptions, so it tends to lead to the hard outcomes in projects. but they always precede. So they're a lead indicator. They're the signal versus the noise. And they give people trends. We present in word clouds, relationship, network maps, and so on. So it's all, we look at it in multiple different ways. So how do you apply that into the P5 standard? Now, I'm also very conscious, you may not even know what the P5 standard is. I didn't know about it really until a month or two ago. It's PMI's standard, and I'll talk about that in a moment. So it's kind of PMI's version of green project management. So I'm going to be applying human-centric data onto that. And there's no criticism at all of the P5, but I thought, crikey, we could make this more accessible, more representative, more timely, and more value add by applying our thinking to it. And fortunately, because of all the copyrights and IP and so on, that is actually possible within the way that PMI have provided it and presented it. So what on earth does human-centric data look like? Well, that's the kind of stuff you'll be delighted. I'm not going to be getting into this in any detail, but this is the kind of things that from the way we do it, the spread of results, percentages, cross-analysis, and so on. And out of that, we then have these typical forms of output of human-centric data. The way that we tend to present it to people, we've become quite good now at doing lots of 2x2s. You can't go wrong with 2x2. So we're doing lots of cuts of this in a slightly different manner with the client projects we do. But that's to give you an idea of kind of, so that what's this human-centric data thing. So let's talk about how do you apply that to P5. That is, if you haven't seen it, the PMI Green Project Management P5 standard. So our focus is that there is a business version of it. We're focusing just on project because I'm a projects person mainly, as are most of you, I assume. And it looks at 5 lenses around product, process, people, planet, prosperity across a structure that has been created of the around planet and so on. So let me just describe what that looks like. So the core model taken from the standard is around people impacts, planet impacts, and prosperity impacts. And it's meant to allow you as a projects professional to assess what is your impact on this project using this structure. And I'll explain a little bit more about that and then show you how we think we've been able to come up with a way of applying it in a slightly different value add way. Now, this is a wee bit of the structure, so apologies if it's a little bit of detail, but just there are 3 domains, the people, planet, and prosperity. There are subcategories. So these are like under people, there are labor practices and decent work, society and customers, human rights, ethical, and so on. And that's where we're mainly going to focus. And then in the elements underneath here, there are actually under people, there are 24 of them. So it's quite a broad brush. There's a lot of different things that are covered, 52 of these elements in theory you've got to consider when you're doing it. And then they apply these lenses, 5 lenses across it. So I'm not taking any credit for this. I'm just simply sharing with you what PMI is already stated within the Green Project Management. So how is P5 applied today? Well, there's impact analysis, sustainability management plan, and then there's ESG and sustainability reporting. All of that is available from PMI, freely available. And then there are different lenses and so on, and they go through, and it's a very large matrix that you complete, which I'll show you in a moment. So in reality, I started looking at this, and I thought, this is quite interesting. So I thought, what is it? Okay, so there's 52 of these things. So they're not analogous to the ESG framework as well. Started looking at it and then thought, right, well, what is it you actually complete? And this is the kind of thing that you complete. So my initial reaction was, crikey, this is wonderful stuff. But boy, does that take an awful lot of work. And there's likely one team are going away and creating that. So what I thought was, Well, with 52 these elements, there's about 260 levels, lens levels that you've got to complete, because once you multiply the 5 lenses by the 52, there's 780 written passages, and that makes up about 1,300 fields. That may well be a great thing to do, but my HCD mindset said there maybe is a slightly different way of approaching this, because it's kind of designed for a team or an individual or individuals completing this thing, as I showed. And that's an example, just to take a snippet of one lens, one element. So you imagine that multiplied by 52 times. And when we looked at it, we thought, how can we simplify this? And the first thing we looked at was when it works through the where you are right now and what you think the impact is against each of these 5 lenses for each element. But then it goes on to say, so what do you think the response should be? Therefore, what comments, optional, what actions would you take to achieve that? That's a big jump, seeing as until you've done that, in our opinion, and all 52, and worked out what on earth you can actually meaningfully achieve. We thought the first thing we would do is to simplify it out by only covering this element in the matrix, only going as far as what is your actual impact in the project, collating all of that, working it all out, and then being far more focused and thinking about what could you do to respond to particular aspects. So again, there are some wordy slides here. It is all available. If you're picking up on the concepts of this, that's all I'm really asking for at the moment. So you can gather the here and now first, only when people, only what people can observe. They can actually evidence that. This is a hypothetically, we could do X, Y, and Z, and it might have this impact. So therefore, we said, actually, let's focus on just that. So that's the first big change. The second big change we thought was make it continuous. So from one-off, and so it appeared as if it was done as an annual thing. We said, imagine you're capturing the data on a far more consistent basis all the way through the project's life cycle. So you'd have to massively simplify it down. You'd then ask different people to complete different aspects of it. And then look for real data to back up across different opinions of different people. So it's not an individual or a small team's opinion, the sustainability team. It's actually across different stakeholder groups, team members within the project itself. So those are pretty fundamental changes. So what does this all look like in practice? Something for you to keep in mind. I'm showing this as we've kind of developed the thinking. All of the thinking you can pick up and apply your own projects. Just so happens we packaged it up in such a way and applied it in a certain way. So the things we believe we need to do is broaden involvement, de-silo the specialists, bring more perceptions into it, show how decisions affected and are affected by sustainability, make it anonymous, transparent, action-oriented. So what is it you're going to do about all of this? And accessible completion and much easier generative AI reporting from it. So that is what we want to do. So let's just go through what would that mean in practice. The first thing we did is think, well, if you remember, if you took it just at the subcategory level, it doesn't really matter about where that is in the matrix, but we thought you likely want senior leaders, external stakeholders taking a very high level view of a number of those groupings of elements. What's their perception and seeing what the difference is between them. Then you've got people who are more involved, maybe part specialists, who would be a different cut, a different layer that you would ask them to assess. And then you'd have the deep specialists who you may even be only asking for one or two of the elements. So you might imagine somebody who's a deep carbon expert within the water cycle to do with whatever. they would have a particular element or two you would say for them to complete. There is no point in asking them about all of the other aspects because they wouldn't likely have an opinion or any knowledge of. So the three tiers I just mentioned there. So if you did it at people impact, so we only chose the people, not the prosperity and planet, simply because it was the first one in the matrix. And if you're asking senior and external view, you might ask them at a high level, simply the questions at that level there. Labour practices and decent work. How does this project affect the working conditions, fair treatment, and develops people, etc.? And ask them to rate simply those. And we do everything in 0 to 100. So you would ask them to rate that, and then you would have a couple of questions about what lies behind your rating. So give us some comments about why you've rated it and what effect is this having on people and society. So this is all about the impact at the moment. You'd multiply that by 3. So if you can imagine, it's not too much. So for a senior leader and so on, this may be 10 minutes work, 5-10 minutes work. So that was the senior external view, and that layer there is at the highest level you're asking. Then we thought the element view, so you would then have another layer down, not absolute special, but you're just asking them likely one thing, one question about each of the different elements. These, by the way, are reworded from PMI's own because we've greatly simplified it down from that. And we ask a couple of open questions as well around it. So we get another, so that's a kind of tier 2. And then finally, there's a kind of tier 3 where you just take one element. So in this case, it's employment and staffing, and you break it down under these 5 lenses that sits underneath it. Interestingly, when I went through and was developing this, the Claude, as you can see, this is partly Claude built, but it's the human side of it as well. In here, it said there are only 3 lenses that are appropriate. So we would do it in such a way that we don't confuse people and asking them slightly strange questions. So these 5 lenses can't be all applied to all of the elements across all of the 3 domains. So I'm hoping that is making some sense so far. I'm going to show you what all this looks like in the dashboards and so on in just a moment. So what does this give you? It gives you a top-down, so you get board senior view of something, but it also gets you the bottom-up. So you can imagine if you have lots and lots of people providing that kind of input, specialists within these elements, the perception at the highest level looking down, and it's the gap, if you will, is the signal. Is there an issue? Is there a equivalent? Is there a risk dissonance? Is there a difference in opinion? What is the real figure or the real level, given the fact that you've got a big difference between them? So the board's view, team view, if you get weak signals on, actually, we need to take action. Now, we've applied that kind of thinking. Joe, interestingly, we supported Joe Jolly in her transforming infrastructure program when she was at the Cabinet Office and applied exactly this, and we applied it to working group and steering group. So the idea was that we were trying to find that dissonance between each of the different groups and perceptions and so on. So, so the same output. So the output stays P5. We're not trying to challenge the underlying structure of P5. It's sound. We're on version, it was 8 or so on. So it's the same hierarchy, that visualization, same scale, same cause impact fields. But what we're saying is make it many calibrated voices, diagnosing primarily to begin with, not trying to solutionize too quickly, and doing it continuously, anonymously, but transparently, and sharing this kind of information. So that's where we got to. So what does this look like in practice? So job 1, the role of AI. So this brings the AI into it, does 2 complementary jobs. So job 1 is the one P5 is already names it, draft reports, tailors messages. So there's some mention of it within the actual standard itself. But the second one is if you can imagine everything I've just talked about, this is one. So I've mocked up. So we've built the engine, we've built bits of the engine to accept the data, and then said, what would a high-level dashboard look like? So there are different elements of it, level of congruence of between people, signals that to act on. There's differences in opinion between people, planet, and prosperity. So the planet is get to lower focus, and the impact is less than it seems to be in prosperity, etc. So it's we mocked this up with synthetic data just to give you an idea. Imagine you had this kind of dynamic dashboard, and I'll show later what that actually would look like in a bit more detail. And then I jumped on even further, and I thought, well, that's great. That's it for the P5 standard. Imagine if we broadened it, so that's the P5, and added in 3 other aspects. If you're going to go to all that trouble, imagine we added in about explicitly on ESG and carbon, so a broader view, the bringing in the UN sustainability goals, a broader view, and carbon, some overlap between, but we can split that out. Our own human-centric data stuff and traditional controls. So you get one view of the project. So a single congruent aware view of what the project will look like. And this is at the very, very highest level, what that might look like. So program X, integrated sustainability delivery view. You'd get the P5 sustainability high level view, like ESG and carbon. You'd get our human-centric data layer that kind of Joe was touching as well. Delivery confidence, level of psychological safety, but also the traditional controls around cost, schedule, risk, and so on. And we've got just some very brief examples to show you examples of what each one of those would look like. That's just a mocked up traditional dashboard that you would have. The ideal is not to have these as 4 separate, but to have one. And we're actually working actively on this, and we're doing some research around what this would look like at the moment. So example HCD dashboards. Like, I'm very conscious of an awful lot of detail, but it gives you an idea of the kinds of things, the visual look and so on across multiple teams. This is a portfolio view on a big hack that we ran recently. I did with Jonathan. Here's an example of a kind of dashboard that you'd have, a human-centric data dashboard that you would be merging in with a traditional dashboard. So this is, again, all available. Here's your the example showed earlier with P5 reporting. So make it dynamic. So you've got a board view, you've got a program level view, you've got a work stream level view, giving different levels of detail with the P5 information. And then the last bit, the fourth bit, is with actually the reason why I've my obsidian second brain and my own time has gone into this. In the last 12 months, been working with on the meeting quality platform with a company called SustainQ to develop up, and we're now delivering this for organizations, a kind of data-driven, very quick, very easy way of assessing ESG and carbon for organizations. So we're working on that, the kind of inputs you have, the outputs you have, very analogous, built on the same principles, built on human-centric, so slightly different but overlapping application. So what we've done is we've effectively proven the multi-level capture. We've done that before, different tiers. We've shown about transparency. How can you give that out? We've done this, we've even applied it to PMOs, and we've tried to apply it always in very quick, short amount of it, small amounts of continuous information to gather from people, built on, as I said, that. I won't go into this, but the platform itself, this is what it actually looks like. But the one thing I would highlight is the way that we've been able to build it is that we provide, so if you imagine each of those tiers within, we're completing a P5, elements of the P5, we've structured it in a way that's a tiered, a tabbed arrangement. So you can say, look, you've got 4 tabs to complete, or 3, or 7, or 1. So, and we can do that anonymously or named, and even send out anonymous team things. So you can give exactly the same thing to a number of people, and then they can make it anonymous. So you bring that, and it's all done in a very clever way to make it as easy as possible to deliver this. So what kind of just to finish up is what the one thought is to, I've got quite intrigued about this and have thought, crikey, could there be an opportunity to not just build bits of it, have some mock-ups, have simulated data, but actually do this for real using the P5 platform? And I don't think it'd be a huge amount of work to do it. So please take the thinking and apply in your context as you will. Materials will be made available. Alternatively, let's build this together as a funded pilot. So what we're proposing is this HCD enhanced diagnostic, what a pilot looks like, configure across the tiers, what we bring, the platform, HCD method, the AI layer, the experience and so on, and what we need as a sponsor for a live project program. Apologies for it sounding like some commercial, but there's lots of other stuff we're getting on with, it's our main day job, but this just intrigued me to think, crikey, this could be something that is developed, and if it's done in a clever way, this could be an enhancement or an addition on top of what PMI have, and then openly offered. There's no point in building this for one person or one organization, but building it for that multiple people could use. So if you're interested in that, then please get in touch. And we've been out and about on the the road, so to speak. Myself, Jonathan, and a number of colleagues doing exactly this kind of thing, talking about, we've got an AI version of this as well, when you do an AI diagnostic. So it's applying our HCD thinking to a number of issues. We think this is one that's prime, that could really make a difference. But hopefully you can see snippets of this that you could take and say, actually, maybe the P5 standard is usable in my team, but do it in that tiered approach, take the things, simplify the questions, ask at different times, make it continuous, be more transparent with everyone with the data, etc. So I'll finish there. I'm conscious I've gone through an awful lot of material very quickly, but also conscious that there may be some questions, Sam, to cover as well. So thank you very much for listening. I'll have a glass of water now.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Donny. So we are now open up for the Q&A session. So please type your question in the chat so that we can read out for Donny to answer. So I found one question from Sun. Optimism about AI will encourage layoff. Is sustainable development for people or for capital?
So let me just have a look at that again.
Yeah, you can look at the chat as well. Yeah.
Sorry, I don't see it. Would you just repeat that? Sorry, Sam, just so.
Okay, so the question is, optimism about AI would encourage layoffs. Is sustainable development for people or for capital?
Crikey. Well, I guess I'll take Joe's optimistic, try and be optimistic and say it could have the potential of having a positive impact in multiple ways. So, sorry if this is not quite answering the question. What Hugo's pointed out is the irony now that we're now using AI. All of us have used AI to produce this, but you can see there's the messy stuff has been added by me. There's potentials to enhance what humans do, but of course there's the opportunity to take it away. I don't think from a prosperity point of view, let's be realistic, it is not going to help the normal person. It's simply going to create a bigger divide. And I personally know that I have thrown myself at this, thus my obsidian second brain. I knew nothing about that apart from a concept 4 months ago, and it's only been working with a couple of brilliant people at previously Martin Paver, now people at James Garner, Nermeen and others, and then John Lohan, who I do work with in my A7C hat on. But I've made that investment to do it. I don't think prosperity from a planet point of view, it will just increase the divide, sadly. And it is going to have a very negative impact on the planet again, because it seems to be totally and utterly uncontrolled. And I'm not sure if that's fully answering the question. So I'm a bit undivided. Having a 19 and a 20-year-old as well, I'm thinking, oh God, is even my own personal use making things worse for them? But I, like Hugo and Joe, are trying to apply this in a really positive way to make a difference.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Donny. Is there any other questions? Yeah, please also list here.
It might be, well, just waiting for some questions. I mean, some of the things to think about in this are, I'd be interested, I don't know if there's a show of hands or anything. I know it's likely a little bit too late. Maybe even in React, would you mind putting a thumb up if you have used the GPM P5 in anger, actually not just looked at it, but you've actually used it? I'd just be interested. Okay, so possibly, even if it's more than that, it's not widely used. Could I ask you, not that you know the detail, and I'm not from PMI presenting about P5, just to cover it quickly, what it is. Would you mind reacting, just putting your thumbs up, if you think you would like to apply it in your project, if you could do it sustainably and easily? Okay. So there is let's take it as a huge gap between actual application at the moment and the desire to do it, which is great. And whether it's P5 or something else doesn't really matter. I think it was what Joe said earlier. It's the mindset. It's simply somebody wanting to talk about it, bring it up, bring people thinking back about what their project is doing and trying to achieve. And that body armor example is a brilliant one. If people don't talk about this, don't bring it to the fore, then it's ignored, and the resource, cost, time, etc. If that is the focus of it, and forgetting about why you're doing the project and the impact that the project and that sermon ends like that.
So there is one question from Jonathan in the Q&A. So let me read it out. I feel the big challenge with the P5 framework is practical application. 3 examples. How realistically, how do you involve your supply chain in the data capture? How do you translate all of your metrics into behavior on the ground? How do you correlate all of this effort with the outcomes of your project? I don't expect you to answer all of this, but please pick one of these to explain how HCD helps overcome the challenge.
Well, I'm talking from applying the platform we use, and if you've got something similar or you can use something, then asking across your supply chain isn't difficult. We've done work in Australia and done work in Sweden in a big industrial project where it's slightly different context, but it was multi-layered from client teams to different contracting and integrating companies and the main contractors, all £1 billion each. And we were able to gather insights from each of them because it's a simple link, a tabs, ask people to complete. And again, that can be done anonymously, groups, and so on. So I think it is the mechanics of it are easy enough. You can't force people to complete it, but that is it's definitely doable. In terms of the pooling the data and so on, I think the platform we use has pretty good analysis techniques to deliver lots of good stuff, in particular to the twos. But now, because of AI, we're back to AI again, the power of being able to identify the links between different groups of people, tiers, different elements, different forms of question, the qualitative and the quantitative and so on, is absolutely outstanding. And dare I say it, far better than 99.9% of humans that would look at that. So you can spot the, oh, crikey, what's this actually telling us? And then the human can ratify and confirm those relationships. And sorry, the last question I think was, Jonathan, what was the last one you asked? I think it was around maybe the presentation of it. As you can see today, everyone so far has been using this, and you can boil down complexity to simplicity for different types of audiences very quickly, automatically, and very easily. It's one of the things we're doing with the platform we use is to do the automated reporting to different types of people, because that's what everyone expects nowadays. You expect a bespoke, appropriate form of reporting for you. And then I saw someone else. Sorry, I've just looked at my Klaus. It's the same one of the earlier question. Does AI serve people or capital? And sadly, at the moment, I don't think, because of the level of control we have, we've got a governance stream. We've got regulation and governance and so on are now massively lacking and massively slow. But we can't slow down the progression. Well, we could if we could do it on a global basis. We can't do it on a global basis, being realistic. So then a country is forced into deciding, do we slow it down and miss out? And anyway, that gets into a whole completely different political conversation. I don't envy in the UK, talk from the UK, the government ministers who try and need to decide in this and go, just go for it. And let's give everyone a chance to do whatever it is they want versus let's control it, which has been more of the EU stand or sort of the UK stance. So lots of things we could talk about this for hours, I'm sure, just on that one particular aspect. But thank you very much for the opportunity, Sam, and Merv and Martin, who originally did the request. So thank you very much for doing this. It's been really brilliant, actually, having to think this up in some detail and develop it. And as I said earlier, if anyone is interested in that offer about developing this, then please be delighted to hear from you.
Okay, thank you all for today. So before we are leaving this session, just a reminder, I have placed the Mentimeter survey in the chat. So just feel free to comment or also give your feedback. We will use this for our continuous improvement for our future events. And at the same time, just a reminder for that you can have a short networking break, and then our next session will start at 11:10 local time. Thank you.